But we do want to start tonight by talking about a world leader who has a history of projecting onto his opponents what he himself is actually doing. On February 27th of 2014, a group of Russian men wearing green uniforms and no identifying military insignia took over the capital of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula and even raised a Russian flag above the building. In the days that followed, these little green men, as they were called, took over Ukrainian military bases and important facilities. But despite what was clearly a Russian-led campaign with Russian military to illegally annex a part of a neighboring country, the Kremlin denied all involvement. When President Putin was asked about the role of Russian soldiers, he completely flipped the argument around, and he flipped it around and claimed, quote, those were local self-defense units. When the reporter pushed him on the fact that the uniforms looked a whole lot like those worn by the Russian army, he even claimed that, quote, you can go to a store and buy that kind of uniform. Easy to find. His argument was basically that it wasn't the Russians who were attacking Ukraine, but instead it was the West who was attacking the Russian people. And this was all simply a matter of self-defense. Now, I was at the State Department at the time, standing at the podium every day, and while we aggressively called out the invasion, landing me, by the way, on the list of favorite Kremlin targets, we were often on our back heels because the Russians had no shame. They took no shame in lying and blurring the lines to create such confusion that it was hard to tell what was fact and what was fiction. We've seen Putin continue to use this tactic over the course of the last nearly 2 years, try to, I should say, claiming Ukraine was on a path to using nuclear weapons, really shouting it from the rooftops, when in reality, it was Russia. Also a country, by the way, with one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world. They were the ones threatening to use them. Last February, Putin gave a speech claiming it was the West who started the war in Ukraine, not that military invasion, of course, we all saw happen with our own eyes. This pattern of accusing others of what you are in fact doing yourself is a classic Kremlin tactic. But if this pattern of projecting onto your opponents what you're actually doing sounds familiar, it's because one of Putin's biggest admirers is using the same tactics right here in the United States. Just this weekend, in a speech in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Donald Trump said this about President Biden.
Joe Biden is not the defender of American democracy. Joe Biden is the destroyer of American democracy. And it's him and his people that think they can do whatever they want, break any law, tell any lie, ruin any life, trash any norm, and get away with anything they want.
Now, if you've ever heard Donald Trump speak, and I bet you have, you know he says a lot of things, often off the cuff. But that was not one of those times, and that's important because this was on purpose. This was part of a strategy. You can literally see that in the black and white on signs that Trump's campaign passed out at the same event that say Biden attacks democracy. And you can see it in a video posted to Truth Social later that night, captioned, Crooked Joe Biden and the Anti-Democratic Party. Not exactly subtle. This claim, of course, comes from the man who tried to overturn our last election, the man who accuses Democrats of vote rigging, when he is the one who has been criminally charged with defrauding American voters. Now, Trump's projection is an obvious attempt to muddy the water. Sound familiar? To blur the line between fact and fiction, to confuse voters about the actual threat, and to mess with their ability to recognize what is real. If everyone is corrupt, then no one is corrupt, right? That's the point. This is a tactic you might find on a playground, too. A child saying, yeah, I know you are, but what am I? We've all experienced that. Or you might also find it in Vladimir Putin's Russia. And projection has also been a major part of Trump's playbook for years. Who can forget this exchange from 2016 about who else but Putin?
That's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit
no, you're
that the Russians.
No, you're the puppet. On top of that, when called a corrupt candidate himself, Trump labeled his opponent Crooked Hillary. And unfortunately, it kind of worked then, and it might be working now. A recent NBC News poll showed 60% of voters have major or moderate concerns about Biden's possible awareness or involvement in the business dealings of his son, despite the fact that even Republican members of Congress admit there is no evidence to suggest the president did anything wrong. Compare that to 62% of voters who have those concerns about Trump facing his criminal and civil lawsuits. And remember, the guy faces a total of 91 charges across 4 cases. That's only a 2% difference in perception, despite an enormous difference in reality. So what can you do? What should everybody be doing about these obfuscating playground bullies, whether in the Kremlin or Mar-a-Lago? Well, the United States did learn a few things since 2014 as well. When Russia invaded Ukraine with a more aggressive military campaign in 2022, the United States took a different tactic. I was at the White House as the press secretary at the time, at a different podium. And the national security team made the decision we weren't going to rely on condemning Putin's actions after they happened alone. Instead, we were going to verbally punch the bully proactively, verbally. We released previously classified intelligence that exposed Russia's plans to invade Ukraine. And it wasn't just about naming and shaming. It was actually about exposing their plans to make it more difficult for them to implement them. And it also equipped our allies and partners around the world with the information they needed to fight back. And that brings me back to how to combat Trump and his own use of the Kremlin playbook. The thing is we can't relax and assume most people will see through it and will recognize the absurdity of these arguments, because they won't necessarily, and they aren't. And his effort to project on his opponents what he's actually doing is to some degree working, at least better than it should be working, which is why it needs to be called out aggressively and specifically. Otherwise, Trump may just be able to follow the Kremlin playbook right back into the White House.